You're listening to the Otis Jiry channel.
Garage Sale by Jeffrey EBRIGHT. Performed by Otis Jiry. I give you quarter. The Asian man showed his sincerity by frantically waving the 25-cent piece in Joe's face. "Nope," Joe replied from his favorite lawn chair. 50 cents. "I give you quarter," he insisted, once again showing Joe the quarter, then showing the electric waffle iron he was vehement about purchasing. "Sorry, mister." Joe slid a Marlboro from his shirt pocket, unfazed by the man's insistence. 50 cents is as low as I go. The Asian man gave a "this isn't over with yet" nod and returned to the table of questionable appliances down at the end of the driveway. The waffle iron remained cemented in his hand like a prisoner's shackles. Old Joe looked around his garage sale domain with pride. The driveway flowed from the maw of a single-car garage that sat back about 10 feet and 6 feet left from the ranch-style house. The driveway was almost 120 feet long and 20 feet in width. The sides of the drives were lined with tables, tubs, and freestanding racks for clothes. The interior of the single-car garage had been converted for merchandise display. Joe had stationed his reclining, well-worn green lawn chair to the right of the open garage. He lazily puffed on his cigarette and absently watched bargain seekers move from table to table like tribal nomads. "This crap bugs the hell out of me," the suburbanite man in Docker shorts and itsod shirt offered. "They think they can get anything they want and not pay a fair price for it. Buttholes," he said, well out of earshot of the Asian man. Joe cocked his New Orleans Saints ball cap, showing the 60-something lines that ran like a road map across his face. "Some people just have a passion for things." Joe smiled and shook out a laugh. "But I ain't selling it for less than 50 cents. Way to stand your ground." Docker man sniffed indignantly and set about the interior of the garage. A young woman, possibly in her late 20s, dressed in disheveled clothes and 2 toddlers in tow, held up a denim jumper. This says $2. Would you take $1? Joe looked into her eyes and saw a painful hollowness staring back. "I can do that, ma'am." Joe nodded. She smiled uncomfortably back at Joe, then jumped back into the clothes rack. Joe relaxed into his ugly green lawn chair. It was like a companion, a comrade in arms, fighting the garage sale war. Sure, there were a couple of loose tethers here and a rusty spot there, but it was just a show of personality, and that suited Joe just fine. "Hey, mister, you got any baseball cards?" A blond boy, brash and 13 years old, stood before Joe. "Yep." "Where?" "Over in that wash tub." Joe eyed him carefully. "Looking for anything in particular?" The boy could not escape Joe's penitent stare. "No," he lied feebly and walked to the bin. Inside the washtub lay several dozen white candy bags, mouths neatly folded over twice and stapled shut. "What's up with that?" "What's that, son?" Joe looked over at the kid. "What's up with those bags, old man?" "Mystery bags, son." Joe took a deliberately long drag from his Marlboro. "Cost you $1 to solve it." "What a rip-off," sneered the kid. "Probably a bunch of no-name has-beens." "Never know if you don't take the chance." "Yeah, right." The kid made his way down the driveway, and off on his mountain bike he went. "Mystery bags, you say?" inquired a man in plaid golf pants and yellow polo shirt. His graying flat-top haircut and manner gave away his age. "I've always been one for a good mystery. The man pulled a crisp dollar from his diamond-studded gold money clip without hesitation. "Thanks." Joe pulled a small green tackle box from under the lawn chair and dropped the pristine bill into the box. Joe pushed the box under the chair and walked over to the investigating man. "This one." The man plucked up a bag. "I think." "You sure?" The man looked up at Joe, slightly apprehensive. "Well, no." Joe crushed out his smoke on the drive and pointed at another one. "That one." "Okay." He took the bag as Joe took back his white trash throne. Brimming with a childlike anticipation, 56-year-old Brett Weeder carefully popped the staple teeth with his manicured thumbnail. He took his time as he rolled open the folds of the white candy bag and looked inside. Crosley Field was hot that day. 90 degrees in the shade if it was a degree less in the cloying humidity. Paper hand fans whirred like hummingbird wings, trying to shoo away the sticky heat. Not that the clear blue sky hinted at the oppressive temperature, as it surveyed the field of brilliant green grass with a rich brown baseball diamond below. The bases peered from the rich dirt like oysters, openly displaying their pearls. Boisterous vendors in red and white striped coats stalked the aisles, some with baskets full of peanuts, some with bulky metal coolers. The carnival wails of "hot nuts" and "cool drinks" intertwined with the din of the crowd chatter, composing a complex, unplanned symphony. Men dressed in their Sunday best struck up stogies and conversations with their new neighbors. In the confines of the ballpark, women were hard to spot in the crowd. "Come on, Brett. We ain't getting any younger, son." His father's forehead cascaded sweat. "Sure, Pop." There was a highness to Brett's voice. It was a tenor he had not had since puberty. He actually had to peer up at his dad, who looked like a giant from Brett's perspective. The usher greeted them in his sweat-soaked white dress shirt, blue vest, and bow tie. He read their tickets and happily escorted them to the first base side of the lower deck, 12 rows back, seats 6 and 7. The Cincinnati Reds were playing the St. Louis Cardinals. Classic National League matchup. Brett was curious to see the Reds' new player, a young Negro by the name of Frank Robinson. To see a black player was as much a curiosity than anything else. "Oh, niggers in the majors," his dad had complained all the way to Crosley. "Next they'll try to take over golf." But Brett just smiled and remembered his mom's tender words. "Your father's just old-fashioned and silly. Never mind, sweetie." She kissed him and shuffled Brett into the family station wagon where Brett spent the hour-long drive to Crosley Field, listening to his dad relating old baseball stories and occasionally ranting. Brett's dad wasn't a bad man. He simply had a blue-collar attitude with all things in life. And as his father had before him, Brett's dad was a racist by virtue of the culture he had grown up in. Brett never understood the dislike of other races his dad espoused, but he loved him just the same. Dad flagged down a metal-cased vendor, bought himself a beer, and Brett the next best thing, a grape Nihi. Brett smiled boldly in anticipation as the huffing vendor set the portable cooler on the steps and opened the top hatch. Ribbons of hazy white vapors evacuated the cooler as the vendor produced the smoking cold bottles. Dad shelled out some change and opened the Budweiser and Nihi with a grunt and a hiss from the pop-tops. Father and son toasted each other and savored their respective refreshing liquids as the players warmed up in their clean white and gray uniforms. Brett dangled his Buster Browns and beamed happiness because he loved Crosley Field. Dad made it a point of taking him there once a year, twice if the Reds were making a run for the pennant. He loved the brightly painted slogans splattered against the outfield wall that surrounded the pristine grass like a big wooden hug. He always imagined how the game would be when viewed through the peepholes in the outfield wall where the poorer kids watched. He guessed they would anxiously take turns after each batter at the open knot of wood, enjoying the game with a play-by-play. He was sure the boy at the peephole would become the play-by-play man, excitedly reporting the actions of the wily batter against the cunning of the pitcher on his elevated dirt mound. That is, until local police ran them away. However, Brett was assured the kids would quickly return when the coppers had moved on to another group of kids to harass and begin their spectatorship by committee. "That's not how you score a double play," Brett's dad would growl, then hastily explain the sanctity of the box score as he corrected the error in Brett's program. Of course, Brett knew how to keep score. Brett never really knew why he did it, but he enjoyed watching his dad get worked up and kept a secret inward smile. He supposed it was the light in his father's eyes that made Brett act dumb. His father's passion was a fire of the brightest star in the night sky, which made the kid in both father and son come alive. It was then Brett remembered he wasn't a kid anymore. Suddenly, the magical sounds and smells of Crosley Field began to fade away as a photograph left to the ravages of the summer sun. Brett Weeder was no longer that happy child dangling his Buster Browns on a lazy day at Crosley Field. He was a 56-year-old successful real estate broker with 4 properties, 3 cars, 2 failed marriages, and one a disenfranchised son, Peter. His 8-room Victorian house was boldly lavish and bitterly lonely, a truly striking reflection of its owner. Where had all the time gone? What had happened to all the things his dad taught him? How had all this precious time slipped through his fingers like proverbial sand? Why didn't he ever recognize the sad, rejected eyes of his son Peter until now? Why did it always seem as though he was living life through frustrated hindsight? "What's the good word?" Joe called from his battered lawn chair. Brett fought a tear away, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, you were saying? Find anything good?" "Yes." Brett swallowed hard. "Yes." Joe smiled, always like a satisfied customer. Brett quickly made for his clip. Joe waved him off. "1 per customer." "But—" The money in his hands felt as useless as shoes on a dog. "Sorry, rules is rules, my friend." Joe pulled his sense cap down. "Besides, seems to me you got something better to do." He motioned to the wrinkled white bag still clutched in Brett's hand. Brett looked cautiously into the bag. He squinted at the contents in trepidation and confusion as he looked again. Brett slowly reached into the bag and pulled out 2 slim, long pieces of paper. The pieces of paper were tickets. The heading was brightly emblazoned with the title, "Reds versus Cardinals." The tickets were set for a 1:05 start tomorrow. His eyes widened at the details. First base side, 12th row, seats 6 and 7. "Yeah, you never know what you find at a garage sale," Joe casually tossed out. "Thank you." Brett offered the old man and shuffled to his new Delta 88. Joe could almost make out the shape of a cell phone in the man's hand as he drove away. "Hello? Pete? It's Dad." "Hey, Dad, what's going on?" A youthful voice came back over the phone. "I was—" Brett paused and mustered his courage. "I was just wondering what you were doing tomorrow afternoon." In the autumn sun of the next day, a 50-something successful real estate agent and his 30-something kid drank beers, ate chili dogs, and kept the box scores in the chattering fan symphony of a bustling stadium. And somewhere between the indigestion and the 7th-inning stretch, an old man began healing the wounds he had painfully left unattended for decades. Coincidentally, The son who had always loved his father unconditionally got his day at the ballpark. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to this story in its entirety. If you enjoy what you hear and what I do and would like to support me and my efforts, visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/Otis Jiry. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button and subscribe today, and share this video with everyone on your social media. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Again, thank you for listening and have a great day. God bless you.